Welcome to July, everybody. Let's talk about some books, specifically the ones that I read last month in June and the books that I'm going to read this month in July. So let's kick it off, shall we? The first book that I read, and I think I talked about this in a decent amount of depth in my last video, my last update video, was A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. It's I don't know I guess it's far future because robots have sentience and robots had like split away from humanity and humanity's like, cool, go for it. And then now we're kind of having this moment where robots and humans are reuniting, so to speak. It's about an individual named Dex, and this person encounters a robot out into the wild. And they have some philosophical conversations. And I have a lot to say about this book. Really, part of it has to do with the philosophy. Part of it has to do with the fact that the protagonist is non-binary. Not that I have anything against that, but I'll get into it a lot in more depth in my review because it's about character selection, character purpose, etc., writing craft stuff, let's say, not politics. This isn't going to be about politics whatsoever, but I'm really looking forward to the review. And according to my poll that I put out the other day, actually right now that I'm looking at it, The Slow Regard for Silent Things, of Silent Things by Patrick Rothfuss, and A Psalm for the Wild Built, both are neck to neck at 25%. As to what you guys would like me to review first. So get in there. We got a dead tie right now. I'll put the link down in the description below as well if you missed it. But check my channel. Go put your vote in. We got 40 votes so far. That's a pretty good turnout. So overall, I really like the book. I have my gripes with it, my questions about it. I really think what I'm going to do to prepare for this review is find some interviews with Becky Chambers and see if she addresses any of these questions I have. So at least I'll be a little bit more informed when I make my opinion. But yeah, overall, enjoyed it. I have some problems with it, but we'll get into it in the review in depth. So next up, the book that I read, this is right here. So this book is Lamb. I talked about this, that I picked this up over in Sweden. I knew nothing about this book. It was staring at me on the shelf, multiple bookstores. I said, this must be a sign. I should probably read it. And I did. I finished it. I really enjoyed this book. I think I did a community. Yeah, I did. I did a community post talking about it. And it's one of these books that I feel like it's going to be a special book to me in the long term. It's very much how Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy is with me. I didn't have the same reaction to this book that I did with the Southern Reach trilogy, but there's something odd about this book. And I think it really just comes down to personal preference and why we read from an individual perspective, because it's flawed. It's a flawed book. Plot-wise, it's odd. It's almost like you don't know where it's going, but you're compelled to keep reading. It's almost as if these weird growths and things that are depicted on the cover, this foliage, this vegetation, whatever you want to call it, is almost like entangling you and just hypnotizing you to move on, very similar to how how Area X will, well, maybe you don't know, but Area X it does something to you, it changes you. Anyway, I know this is a weird discussion, right? But this book is about a boy, he's like 15 or 16, I think, and he loses his father very early on in the first chapter, in fact. And that first and foremost, that's a weird thing about the book is that it starts off very heavy exposition, and I was like, oh man, what did I get myself into? I'm not going to like this. The rest of the book is going to be terrible if this is how it starts off, but I was wrong. He does exposition in an interesting way, which I'll talk about in the review. I don't want to waste your time here. His mother is dealing with the after effects of that. She's grieving, and it's really affecting her, let's say, and not just an emotional way, but a physical way. And this boy, he is, why can't I remember his name? I'll remember it for the review. This boy, he's caught in the middle of it, and he has to kind of grow up on his own in a way. He just has to have a lot of strange life experiences, but the entire plot of this novel, all of the events of this novel are wrapped in this, like it's called here, moss-covered horror. So there is a body horror element to it. There is a natural element to it. There's definitely science fiction, and the science fiction really hits you at the end of the book when things are more or less divulged or explained as to what this thing is all about. Enjoyed it, hypnotizing. I was transfixed, like I said, even though the story itself was kind of slow. I just kept wanting to read more. I don't know. It's one of those things that's difficult to articulate, and hopefully I'll be able to articulate it a little bit better in my review. So it will encourage you, hopefully, to to read it. And here for watching this video, I'll give you a little bit of a hint. There's going to be a little bit of a surprise in this review. And that's all I'm going to say. If you watch that video all the way to the end, perhaps, you will find out. But yeah, it's as if David Cronenberg and Jeff Vandermeer wrote a novel. That's how I feel about it. So if that piques your interest, pick it up, or you can wait for my review. Anyway, that's enough about Lamb. The next book I read was The Broken Sword by Poul Anderson. So this one on my Discord server was explained to me as darker and more interesting or more captivating or just a better story than The Lord of the Rings. That's how it was billed to me. It's definitely darker. It's not Lord of the Rings. I would say overall I enjoyed it. This is interesting. I've reviewed a few books this way. The first one that comes to mind is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, and that I can appreciate the intent of the writer, meaning I understand why the story was framed in a certain way. In the case of The Broken Sword, it's framed in a very just old story, old mythical story, like something like The Odyssey, something like Beowulf, in which it's not very character driven. And I think I'll leave it at that, and I'll save the rest of the meat of it for my review, but it's very shallow. But I think it's purposely supposed to be shallow, at least I think so, because of what the introduction says. Anyway, if you've read The Broken Sword, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So that'll be an interesting review to do, because I find that a lot of reviews on BookTube are strictly about subjective opinions. And we are subjective by nature as humans. I think there's a world where you can at least take yourself out of the equation, much like I tried to do with Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros, and look at the story for the sake of a story, right? Like what is it doing? What does it try to do? Did it succeed on that level without, getting my personal bias into it? I really think a lot of booktubers could learn a lesson by doing that, looking at things not just through a subjective lens, but looking at it and trying to figure out, okay, well, why didn't I like it? Is it because the intent of the writer and it's just not the kind of story I want to read? Because I think that's valid. I don't think you have to like everything. I do think you have to at least recognize and respect a certain kind of intent that a writer is bringing to his or her books. I'll leave it at that. I'll get more into it in my review. The next two books, yeah, because we've gone through three already, and normally, like I said, I read a book a week, but I asked you guys out there, as I do every month, recommend me some books. I'll put them in a poll, and a lot of you guys did. You guys, I think there was 8 or 9 people, something like that, gave me recommendations. And so because they were both very short, I read both of them. And those two books are, well, let's start with the first one. At Night, All Blood is Black by David Diop. This book I really enjoyed this book. I'll get into it in the review, of course, but it grabbed me from the first sentence, from the first paragraph, from the first chapter. And I feel like that's what every book should do. Unfortunately, not every book does that. But this one really hit me. It started with this guy, he's holding his friend in his arms in a shitty, like, muddy trench in the middle of a battleground. Anyway, I won't spoil it for you. I'll get into it in the review. But it's really a study of a man in the middle of a war losing his mind slowly. It's a very short book. I think it's under 200 pages if I remember correctly. But I really I was swept away in the mud, in the grit, in the rain, and the black blood, of course. A lot of stuff to talk about that one, particularly the fact that the protagonist from Senegal, and he joins the French army, and I'm pretty sure it's World War I, and they're fighting the Germans. And it was cool to see that perspective. And this kind of leads me to my criticism or questions I have for A Psalm for the Wild Built regarding the protagonist being non-binary, because you can tell that David Diop, it was very intentional to have this fish out of water, let's say, someone who is not in the place they're supposed to be, or seemingly, right? So you have this guy from Senegal with all of these blue-eyed French soldiers. What is that like for this man? And I think it was explored beautifully, and I really enjoyed it. And to me, that, again, is why you put a lot of thought into your POV character or characters, your protagonist. It's not just about, hey, this would be cool, or this would be inclusive, or whatever it might be. This might provide diversity. There was intent that was reinforced through and through with the characterization, with the plot, everything. And that's exactly what I think every book should do. I will save the rest of it for my review. The last book I read in June, as requested and voted on by you, is none other than Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers, Arkady and Boris. I actually had to import this from the UK, I think, because it was unavailable in the US. This was, I don't know, maybe like 2011, 2012, something like that. And because I was always just fascinated, I love the film Stalker by Tarkovsky. I love playing the video games that were inspired by the work. Just this atmospheric, bleak, gloomy, the strange unknown, right? The mystery of the unknown, as or the horror of the unknown, as Lovecraft might say. I've always loved that setting. And so, of course, back then when I picked this book up, I read it. I can't say it had the same impact on me that the games or the film did, but rereading it again, and I believe the one I'm rereading, or the one that I did read, is a new translation, and it was a fantastic translation. I can't say that this book still evoked the same emotions or feeling for me that the film did or the games, but looking at it closer, looking at it again after so many years have gone by, I appreciate it. There's a lot about it I love. There's a lot about it I'm kind of indifferent about. I'll get into it more in my review, of course. So if you were wondering why I didn't put a third poll out to have a vote off, that's why, because both of these books were extremely short, so I was able to tackle both of them. Okay, that is it for my What I Read in June. And I have a very brief thing to talk about, a film that I highly recommend you to see. It is Mars Express. It just came out, well, just released to stream or buy on Blu-ray. It's an animated film, not a kid's film. It's an adult film, not that kind of adult film. But it's out of France. I loved it. I thought it was so good. It's exactly what's missing in so much of adult animation. Not that kind of adult animation. Adult animation that I don't even seem to find in anime, and that is no melodrama, of course. I know you guys who love your anime, you love your melodrama, and I'm okay with it too sometimes. Brilliantly acted, amazingly animated, the cinematography, the subtext, oh my God, there is so much subtext, beautiful storytelling subtext that you only really see in film with real people, not animation. It was done here. Transitions that were subtextual. Oh my God. I as someone who loves storytelling, I could gush about this all day long. All the little things it did, all of the things it didn't do, which can be just as important. It takes place in the year 2200, so not that far into the future. And there's been a colony placed on Mars. So we have people living on Mars, but also really the main thing, and I know this sounds tired because everyone's talking about AI, but really the premise is we've created all of these robots. However, we've kind of imprisoned their minds with their minds with code, in that they don't have agency. They have to follow our rules. Very similar to the Robot Chronicles by Isaac Asimov. You know, the three laws of robotics. And speaking of which, there's all kinds of homages in this film. Granted, they are not in your face. Some of you will probably not see a lot of them unless you have a very deep knowledge of science fiction film and animation, of course. But it's playing with the idea that if we've created these AI, and they have the ability to be sentient, right? Or they have a consciousness, let's say. What is it like if we lock them away and make them our slaves? Is that right? Is that wrong? What is it? So it plays with this idea. There's so many cool concepts in it. I'll stop talking about it. Just go check it out. I promise you, you will not regret it. Well, if you watch this channel, I feel like you probably won't regret it. All right, well, let's talk about what I'm going to read in this month of July. And I know it's a hot summer, but I don't wait for October to read horror books. And really, this horror book is by an author who I have not read in some time. And that author is Paul Tremblay. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I read a short story of his, part of the Creature Feature collection that Amazon released that I did review. Maybe I'll put a card up here. But I was disappointed by that story. But however, I love Head Full of Ghosts. I love The Cabin at the End of the World. He has a couple of misses that I've read as well, but overall, I really like Paul Tremblay's work, so I'm going to read Horror Movie. Part of the reason why I chose this book is that, number one, obviously I haven't read Tremblay in a long time. Number two, it's a new book. I find that I know a lot of channels out there, they try to read new stuff, what new publications. So I've decided that at least one book that I'm going to read per month is going to be a new one. And don't get me wrong, I love all the old stuff too. I love stuff that's one thing about books that's kind of interesting, is that they're not like films where films kind of feel dated. I mean, books will over time, of course, but you can read a book that's 5 years old and it's a little bit different than watching a movie that's 5 years old. So I love that about books. I've never really considered always including a new book in, but I think, probably for you guys out there who want to see new stuff reviewed, as well as for the algorithm, I'm sure it's going to be beneficial. This book, like I said, I don't know much about it. I know it's about it's a twist on the cursed film genre. So something like The Ring, where you have a tape and, somebody watches it and they're going to die in 7 days or 9 days or whatever it was. Takes place in the 90s. Sounds exciting to me. I love that concept. But I would say if it was done by any other author, the cursed film genre would be turning me away, because it feels like a little cheesy. easy, I guess, but I think Tremblay might have something. We'll see. That's going to be the first book I'm going to read. All right, book number 2, and I really hesitated to put this in there, but in the polls, in the last polls that I put up, this was something that was not only requested because it was in a poll, but it was highly voted on, and It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover, and I know this has been all over YouTube. A lot of people have reviewed it. I know this book isn't for me, first and foremost, very much like Fourth Wing, but I always think it's important to read things that you know aren't for you, especially when you're someone like me who's reviewing books on YouTube, because I think it just gives you more perspective, and it will just improve your reviews on books that you know you will like, because it'll allow you to, again, like I said, separate yourself, your interests from the book you're reading, and try to look at it from an as close as you can objective view, even though I know that's completely impossible. So yeah, I said it, it's in the video, it's going to happen. I really went back and forth on this because I wasn't sure, but I've told a lot of people out there that that this one is on the list, that I've been considering it. So It Ends With Us. And the third book, well, you guys should know anyway if you're subscribed. That's Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer. I'm doing a read along. I'm probably tonight going to read the second chapter so I can get a video out maybe on Thursday covering it. One chapter in, I'm loving it. It feels like old times. It's just as great as it was when I read it the first time. But yeah, if you haven't checked that out, I'll put a card up here. Pick up a copy if you haven't won one. Join the read along because we're reading the entire damn Southern Reach series. Plus, well, I guess this is inclusive of the fourth and final, maybe final book, Absolution. Actually, it's a prequel to the entire series. So yeah, it's going to be a hell of a read along. It's going to be, what, 3 or 4 months in? Hopefully you will come along for the ride with me and the rest of us who are reading. So what does that leave us with? Well, there's one more book. Or maybe it'll be another situation like last month where I'll have to read 2 short books because you guys give me so many suggestions. So here's how it works. If there is a book that you would like me to read and review, because I will always review these ones that you submit and vote on, drop it down in the comments. And I don't think I clarified this as much last time, but you don't have to submit a title. Other people are going to do it. I guarantee you a lot will. And then you can just like that comment. So what I can do is look at all of the likes on those comments to create the poll. Now, again, like I said, we might be in a situation where I'm creating 2 polls and a poll off, but just know the YouTube polls only allow up to 5 selections. I will prioritize the ones that have the most likes, of course. We'll just see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But that's it for me. That is what I read in June. That is what I'm going to read this month, at least the first 3. I don't know what the last 1 or 2 are going to be. So drop your comments in. I want to get these polls up sooner than later. Let me know, what are you planning to read? Did you read anything great last month that I should know about? Let me know down in the comments below as well. But thanks for watching and thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you in the next one.